October 2015 brought disturbing news that quickly spread through news channels worldwide. Among the stunning landscapes of Uganda, a country justifiably called the Pearl of Africa, a young Dutch woman of 21 years, a medical student named Sophia Koetje, vanished without a trace. Her travel motives were noble. She sought to bring aid to the local population. The young woman worked as an intern at one of the region's hospitals, and upon completing her internship, she decided to treat herself to a well-earned reward, a trip to an African safari. However, she would never return from this journey. The Ugandan authorities were quick with their official verdict, choosing the simplest and most convenient explanation: the young woman was attacked by wild animals. But as new facts accumulated, it became increasingly clear that the real story of her disappearance concealed something far darker and more terrifying. The girl's full name was Sophia Isabella Frederica Koetje. She was born on April 2, 1994, in the capital of the Netherlands, Amsterdam. Her parents, Gerard Koetje and Maria Sluijkerman, raised 3 children, of whom Sophia was the eldest. Her character was refined, her soul open, and her compassion for others simply remarkable. The energy of this young person seemed to have no visible limits. Her teenage years brought her years of experience in a youth theater company, where the girl honed her own courage and passion for performing on stage. This passion instilled in her the ability to be noticeable and not fear the close attention of others, but medicine turned out to be her true life path. Eventually, Sophia firmly decided to dedicate her existence to serving people. She belonged to those personalities who prefer concrete actions. Sports was one of her passions. Basketball and hockey games took up considerable time, and when she needed to organize her thoughts, the girl would go for a run in the legendary Amsterdam Vondelpark. When tragedy struck, she had just turned 21, but she already had a bachelor's degree in medicine under her belt. She was pursuing the path to realizing her dream of becoming a doctor confidently and purposefully. The summer season of 2015 became a time of major decisions. Driven by a thirst for adventure and a desire to gain unique practical experience, she made the decision to do an 8-week internship in Uganda. Everyone who had the honor of knowing Sophia personally unanimously affirmed one thing: an extraordinarily bright future awaited her. Her determination was impressive, and her ability to harmoniously combine intensive studies with various side jobs, from distributing promotional materials to caring for small children, commanded respect. Sophia's central ambition was to master specialization in the field of tropical medicine. This aspiration went far beyond ordinary career calculations. It was a true mission that involved helping residents of the most remote regions of the globe while simultaneously learning about world diversity. It was precisely this love of travel and getting to know different cultures that directed her steps to Uganda. Sophia completely immersed herself in work responsibilities. The hospital's medical staff couldn't help but note her exceptional enthusiasm and complete dedication. She performed assistant functions during surgical procedures, helped deliver babies, and never considered any work beneath her dignity. When necessary, she could without hesitation pick up cleaning equipment and tidy the floors. Her dwelling became a student dormitory, where 10 other interns lived with her. Despite the continuous noise and bustle around her, Sophia drew pleasure from each day lived. Uganda made a huge impression on her. Its people, wildlife, distinctive traditions, all of this struck her right in the heart. The girl even began learning the local dialect, striving for deeper understanding of her patients and establishing more trusting contacts. Nearly daily phone conversations with relatives in the Netherlands were filled with her enthusiastic stories about her work days and fresh emotions. The country so captivated her soul that Sophia began considering the option of returning here after obtaining her degree, and perhaps even permanent residence. However, behind this external facade of cheerfulness and achievements lay an internal struggle that only the closest circle knew about. When Sophia turned 16, doctors diagnosed her with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness affected her emotional state, provoking periods of heightened excitability, impulsive actions, and psychological instability. Such episodes required systematic medical supervision. Thanks to pharmacological therapy and unwavering support from her family, Sophia developed the ability to keep the illness under control and lived a completely normal life. At the same time, this very medical diagnosis would later transform into a key and extremely controversial component of the investigative actions regarding her disappearance. Sophia's practical training reached its finale on October 22, 2015. She felt an internal incompleteness to her African journey and made the decision to extend her stay for another 2 weeks to familiarize herself with the region's natural wonders. On October 23, a 5-day safari expedition began, whose participants included, besides her, 2 other students from the Netherlands and a local guide who also performed the functions of driver. Investigative authorities never disclosed the personal data of these individuals. The travel plan was impressively packed and covered Uganda's most spectacular natural locations. The itinerary included visiting Fort Portal, Kibale National Park, the urban centers of Gulu and Pakwak. The final point of the route was Murchison Falls National Park, the country's largest and most famous nature reserve. This territory was renowned for powerful waterfalls and impressive biological diversity. The fauna is represented by lions, elephants, hippopotamuses, and giant Nile crocodiles. On October 28, around noon, the group reached the park's territory. After completing an impressive water excursion along the Victorian Nile, the travelers settled into a student educational complex under the management of Uganda's Wildlife Protection Service. The camp's infrastructure had a modest character: compact residential structures, collective recreation zones, and sanitary facilities located several dozen meters away from the sleeping buildings. During unpacking, Sophia took a small empty bottle that she had been using during the journey as a portable waste container, and headed in the direction of the toilet stalls. The clock showed approximately 6:30 in the evening. The solar disk was descending toward the horizon, and darkness began rapidly consuming the area. One employee of the camp facility recorded her presence near the restrooms. She remained in a static pose, thoughtfully observing in the direction of the river artery, located at a distance of about 600 meters from the camp territory. This observation became the last reliably confirmed moment when Sophia was seen alive. Several minutes passed. Her companions noticed the fact of her prolonged absence and decided to examine the sanitary zone. She wasn't found there. They conducted a sweep of the entire camp area, loudly calling out her name. Not a single response was heard. The girl literally evaporated. Only after a 15-minute interval, realizing the seriousness of the situation that had developed, they transmitted information about the disappearance to local park rangers. A search operation began. However, the African darkness that was rapidly approaching transformed the search efforts into an almost hopeless and fruitless endeavor. Park rangers methodically examined the location with flashlights, while the girl's companions in a panic made attempts to reach her attention. They started the car engine, activated Sophia's favorite musical composition, and set it to continuous playback, cherishing hope that the familiar melody would reach her and elicit a response. However, from the impenetrable darkness came exclusively acoustic signals of nocturnal fauna. When the clock hand approached 9 in the evening, and Sophia still could not be found, one of the members of her group made the most horrifying phone call of his existence. He dialed the number of her mother, Maria Koetje. Maria, who had literally recently been visiting her daughter in Uganda, was morally destroyed by the news received. Not losing a single moment, she began preparations for air travel to the Ugandan state. The morning of October 29 was marked by significant intensification of search measures. Police forces and army units came to the aid of park rangers. In the nearest time, an initial material indication appeared. That same compact plastic container with which Sophia had departed. It was located only 5 meters from the river's edge, but this find provoked significantly more questions than it provided explanations. For what reason was the bottle in this place? Had Sophia really approached such a dangerous distance to the water surface? The Nile waters at this geographical point represent a fatally risky zone, especially during nighttime. In these waters, crocodiles and hippopotamuses live in enormous quantities, which are classified as some of the most aggressive representatives of African fauna. governmental structures instantly formulated a hypothesis about an attack by a predatory creature. However, it very quickly became clear that reality was far more complicated. On October 30th, approximately 40 hours after the moment of disappearance, in immediate proximity to the bottle discovery location, chaotically scattered personal belongings of Sophia were found. This picture created an exclusively artificial impression. In the list of discovered items figured her tourist pants, a single piece of hiking footwear, sunglasses, a damaged monetary banknote with a denomination of 1,000 shillings, and an emptied souvenir packaging material. However, the most astonishing and ominous component became textile fragments separated from her pants. These pieces were tangled in a tree branch at a 5-meter height from the ground surface. The spatial placement of objects looked completely illogical. What's more, the territory showed an absence of even a minimal amount of blood traces or signs of physical confrontation. How did the pants end up at such a significant tree height? For what reason were the objects dispersed over such a large space? And most essential, where are the evidence of attack located and where is Sophia herself? An even more anomalous fact was revealed that rangers who thoroughly examined this territory during the first night search operation didn't discover any of these objects. The items materialized here only after completion of a 40-hour interval. A suspicion immediately formed regarding the possibility of their deliberate planting at a later time with the purpose of imitating an animal attack and directing the investigation in a false direction. An expert in the sphere of survival in extreme conditions and private investigator Thomas Cohn, having conducted analysis of photographic images of evidentiary material, arrived at a stunning conclusion: the pants were not damaged by dental structures of a wild creature, but instead were carefully cut with a knife instrument and subsequently torn manually. The complete absence of hematological traces or biological remains only intensified skeptical attitudes. As Thomas precisely emphasized, not a single representative of the animal world on the planet would place garment items on trees and pedantically arrange personal belongings. This entire composition resembled a primitive and unprofessional staging. The concept of an attack by a wild animal turned out to be exclusively comfortable for Ugandan governmental circles, since it allowed for rapid completion of the case and avoidance of a public scandal capable of causing damage to the tourism sector of the economy. However, factual data testified to the opposite. Not a single person recorded sounds of screaming. At the incident site, animal tracks were absent, and the trajectory from the camp location to the river line was characterized by complexity, dense vegetation, and a high level of danger, especially during nighttime hours. For a foreign national deprived of survival skills in the wild, covering this route under conditions of absolute darkness was a practically unachievable task. During investigative actions, the focus of attention repeatedly shifted to Sophia's medical condition. As was already noted earlier, her bipolar affective pathology could generate temporal phases of impulsive behavior and hypertrophied self-confidence. According to statements from her travel companions, approximately on October 26, during a 2-day period before the disappearance, Sophia's behavioral patterns acquired an atypical character. She almost completely refused sleep, conducted incoherent verbal communications, and performed actions with elevated risk. According to unofficial information, she remained by the campfire until late evening and probably destroyed seating furniture with the purpose of using it as fuel. At the moment when the girl's anomalous behavior became unconcealed, psychological tension arose in the collective. Companions considered the option of phone contact with her mother, however Sophia managed to persuade them to refrain from this step. The guide escort, attempting to neutralize the conflict situation, even modified the route toward a calmer variant. However, after arrival at Murchison Falls National Park, her condition, judging by everything, stabilized, but subsequently instability returned with increased intensity. A hypothesis exists that, being in such a vulnerable psychological state, she could have given trust to the wrong person or in a moment of impulsive urge left the camp territory in solitary mode. Her medical diagnosis, undoubtedly, complicated investigative procedures. It had the potential to explain the reasons for Sophia leaving the camp, however absolutely could not clarify the mysterious spatial placement of objects and her totally traceless disappearance. Relatives categorically denied, nothing analogous had ever happened to her. And mental constructions regarding voluntary termination of her own existence had never arisen in her either. On October 30th, the maternal figure of the girl, Sophia Koetje, arrived at the Murchison Falls territory. She conducted air travel accompanied by official representatives of the Netherlands diplomatic mission. Search operations immediately reached a qualitatively new level of intensity. Helicopter aviation was included in the matter, and even a specialized team of unmanned aerial vehicle operators dispatched from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. However, no indications of Sophia's presence could be detected. In the Ugandan media space, this story received minimal informational coverage. The hypothesis about an attack by an animal creature was accepted as dominant. And in a short temporal interval, the case received official closed status. At the same time, the Dutch media sector didn't cease attention to this story, actualizing numerous questions regarding the real circumstances of the event. The maternal figure of the girl Maria didn't capitulate. During subsequent years, she carried out returns to Ugandan territory more than 20 times, implementing autonomous investigation and constantly discovering new discrepancies with official documentary reports. In 2019, she stumbled upon critically important informational leads. A former functionary of the management structure of Uganda's wildlife, Stephen Yadru, publicized a statement that during the nighttime period of disappearance, he observed how Sophia conducted conversation with an alternative employee of the park facility. This second person categorically rejected all assertions and was never subjected to proper procedures of official interrogation by governmental authorities. Maria also established a shocking fact that for unknown reasons wasn't disclosed at the initial stage. During the nighttime period of the disappearance, approximately 400 recruits of wildlife management were conducting field training measures only 2 kilometers from the student camp location. A logically grounded question arose: did the investigation conduct verification of alibis of this entire contingent of persons? All discovered objects belonging to Sophia were transported to the Kingdom of the Netherlands for conducting expert research. Deoxyribonucleic acid analysis confirmed these were her belongings. However, on these objects was also identified an unidentified male genetic profile. This discovery transformed into a turning point, indicating a high degree of probability of abduction or crime. An excessively large number of persons were in immediate proximity, and the composition with objects created an impression of staging. Suspicions formed regarding an attempt at masking true circumstances. Probably, with the purpose of protecting someone from their own structure or avoiding critical statements addressed to the park's protection system. After all, shifting responsibility onto wild fauna is so elementary. Over the past years, a numerous quantity of versions formed. The official narrative construction about an animal attack was practically discredited. Variants of drowning were considered, as well as the possibility that Sophia simply lost spatial orientation. However, not a single person recorded sounds of screaming, no traces were discovered, no bodily remains were found. The hypothesis about suicide through her diagnosis was decisively rejected by the family circle. Sophia sincerely felt attachment to life. She was constructing large-scale future plans and maintained close relationships with her relatives. One of the most discussed and chilling hypotheses is abduction. Probably, with targeted orientation toward human trafficking. Both mysterious material evidence and the presence of foreign genetic information testify in favor of this version. Perhaps Sophia was led away by someone from those persons who were in the camp location or in its vicinity. The absence of traces of physical confrontation and hematological traces could testify that someone with a high level of experience acted, capable of eliminating all evidence. One shouldn't forget about the fact that only 2 kilometers away were located hundreds of trained recruits who perfectly possessed technologies of masking any evidence in the natural environment, and the psychologically unstable condition of the girl could transform her into easy prey. This hypothesis evokes horror, especially considering the discovered genetic information and the persistent silence of local governmental structures. However, in the absence of direct evidence, it remains exclusively a theoretical concept. Sophia's family circle continues a desperate struggle for establishing truth. Maria carries out fundraising, hires private detectives, and advances demands to governmental authorities regarding renewal of investigation. In 2019, Uganda's prosecutor indeed issued an order about initiation of new investigation, however it ceased activity due to the pandemic situation and electoral processes of 2021. Maria continues to insist on conducting comparative analysis of genetic material of that same employee who was allegedly observed with Sophia last, with the biological sample discovered on her objects. This could either eliminate suspicions from him or become a genuine breakthrough moment in the case. The latest informational messages concerning this case appeared in the month of June 2024. In the defendant's dock appeared Michael Kajambu, the guide escort who provided service for Sophia's group. It turned out that he didn't possess valid licensing documentation, which, according to the opinion of governmental structures, could indirectly influence the tragic result. At the court session, that same witness Stephen Yadru provided testimony that during the nighttime period before disappearance, Sophia and her companions violated regulatory norms of the camp territory. They activated musical recordings at high volume, and approximately at 4 o'clock in the morning, he observed how Sophia delivered blows on wooden panel constructions and made attempts at ignition of grass coverage. These were obvious indicators of exacerbation of her pathological condition. Stephen asserted that he carried out warning to guide Michael about critical necessity of transporting the girl to a medical establishment, however he ignored his verbal messages, and the next evening period Sophia disappeared. This is currently the only judicial process associated with this case, and it doesn't even touch upon the direct fact of her disappearance. The family structure headed by the unbreakable maternal figure Maria Sluijkerman continues their struggle for obtaining answers, cherishing hope to one day solve this grim mystery. And what is your opinion? Did Sophia transform into a victim of wildlife, as Ugandan governmental structures assert, or did she encounter a predator significantly more dangerous, a human being? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.